Yeah. So in the first three parts, what we have gone into the scaling, evolution of microelectronics. Started with Moore's law. We have seen the different aspects. What were the consequences of Moore's law, starting since its publication of that paper in 1965. Then we have seen that how Dennard's paper paved the way for a way of implementing the scaling, uh, and then the various another fabrication technique like the implantation. What was the role of implantation in realizing the CMOS, especially in the threshold voltage adjustment. And then we have seen the different challenges to scaling. We have seen the physical challenge. We have 3-4 aspects we have discussed. One was the modeling challenges, because simulation or the modeling play a very important role in all walks of human life, especially in engineering. So the modeling and the challenges due to scaling in the modeling, because every 18 months or so your device size is shrinking, and which introduce additional physical effects in the device, and which in turn will change the character. There could be a change in the characteristics of the device, so that can affect the design. So the model has to be changed. So the modeling challenges, incorporating more and more uh, 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 issues in the device, in the model. So that was so naturally your complexity of the model was increasing. So that was the one aspect we have discussed. Then it was the fabrication challenges, or the which we call the technological challenges associated with the scaling, like the process involved, whether it is the crystalline growth, whether it is the doping, whether it is metallization, or it is lithography, because lithography is one of the central thing in scaling. So these challenges we have addressed. So this broadly we have discussed these aspects, and then we have seen that like whether CMOS is has run its course, and we are going to see the end of CMOS. So we need to look beyond CMOS. We have seen some non-conventional. In fact, if you look back, we'll see that a lot of changes has happened in CMOS in the different technology nodes, especially after 45 nanometer node. We have seen the channel region was replaced by strained silicon germanium layer. Then we have seen silicon dioxide was replaced by what is known as high-K material. Typically, hafnium oxide was introduced, and then at 22 nanometers, we have seen the architecture of the device itself has changed. You have the tri-gate or FinFET structure was introduced, and then beyond 2020, people are talking of gate all around. Already, many publications are available, but the physical realization of those is to happen. So, presently, they're like as per the ITRS or IRDS, which so earlier it was ITRS. Now it is taken over by IEEE, and the roadmap is typically known as IRDS. So it is projected that with the gate all around and skyscraper kind of architecture, that is a multi-layer architecture, 3D with the vertical integration. The CMOS and Moore's law may stay in course at least for another 10-15 years. That is what the prediction is. So these are the aspects we have discussed so far. You ask the question again.
Can you elaborate about this vertical integration? What do we actually mean by vertical integration in our chip or semiconductor?
See, actually, you have seen, the best example I can tell you is in cities, what happens actually. There is no horizontal space available. Like we go to Delhi, you are in Noida, and then in Bombay. What you do is you go towards so you develop skyscrapers, you go for the flats. A similar kind of concept is used in CMOS also. So you have metallizations, and that there are 2D or 3D structures are created. So you have that kind of, and using wires you make the interconnections. And today we have chips with 7 or 8 metal layers, and those interconnection between the metal layers are through wires, and that is the idea of Skype. I mean, I don't have the figure with me. Probably in the next lecture, I will show you the figure. So then that will make it clear. If with the figure, it will be clear. I had to search it out. So I will share it with you later. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So any further clarification?
No, actually, just like we may, if we have to make in a smaller area, if we have to make arrange more houses, then we can go like in our buildings we go multi-floor structures.
Yeah, exactly.
So same way.
Yeah, similar. This is similar. I won't say same, similar. This is something similar actually.
Okay, so we are making more devices by placing kind of more floors or more stacking.
Exactly, similar. It is somewhat similar to that actually. That is IRDS visualize that kind of structures. Already it is happening because you have level 2, level 3. I mean, there are 7 to 8 levels of metallization. So you can see the metallization, that interconnection delays was a serious issue because the interconnections were running into meters to kilometers because you have 1 billion transistors or more. And when you are the interconnection lines can go run into few kilometers. So what they have done is you are using multi-level metallization already. So you have through wires, you are interconnecting them. So the RC delay is reduced that way. So it is already happening. So this kind of thing is visualized actually. So we'll see some figures. I mean, there are some images you can see that I will show in a later, like in the subsequently. Yeah. Anything else?
No, please continue, sir.
Yeah, so this was a thing. So this was some of the things which we had seen. Now, okay, 22 nanometer node, then you had 14 nanometers, 7 nanometers, and the things were, I mean, many of those devices are already available. What next? So, research efforts were going on in finding out, okay, let us now look beyond the CMOS. Okay, we were so for almost how many decades actually, starting from 70s. It was running. It was typical. The first CMOS based technology came in 70s. Let us say 70s, 80s, 90s, and then already almost 2 decades in this. It has run its course. There's probably another 10 years or another decade also it may run. So then one need to look beyond CMOS. So that is where, so we talk of some of these new device concept which is coming in. That is based on a totally different kinds of physics. So far, whatever be the structure of the device, it was based on most of the field effect devices. Typically, you have a gate which will induce a conducting layer or a channel, and then you have conduction between what is known as source and the drain. That was so all these generation of devices. It was the basic principle. Now let us. I mean, it was felt that we need to go beyond that, and we need to look for. That is one thing. Second thing, that is one philosophy. Second thing is we were so far we were dependent on the numbers. Performance was obtained by increasing the numbers. See, for example, like you want the computational speed, we want to increase, you introduce more and more components and reduce the area, you get more. See, it's like you put more laborers at work to increase the performance and speed of your effort, work. That was the idea. So, and Moore's law enabled you that. So now you say, okay, if I get an efficient person who can carry out 10 persons work instead of 10 persons, I can put one person and get the work done. So I can do it faster, even without increasing the number. So you don't have to worry about scaling, or you don't have to worry about putting more and more components. Then another issue which I might have mentioned is the dark silicon problem. Because of the power consumptions, even though you have so many, your technology was allowing you to put more and more devices into a smaller area, but the issue was because of the power constraints, you are not able to use all of them together. So you had these multi-core architectures and those kind of things. There are dark silicon emerged. So beyond 2007, you have introduced this multi-core architectures, and all kinds of different kinds of device architectures were introduced. So where the basic idea was, you don't use all of these devices. You are taking advantage of scaling. At the same time, we are not using all those devices simultaneously. So that kind of things. But the performance, there was some improvement in the performance. There was not marked increase in the frequency, because earlier you were increasing if you look typically into the microprocessor, earlier you see that there is a drastic increase in the clock frequency, but in the recent past you don't see that kind of increase in the frequency and things like that. So those kind of things. But then you are taking advantage of this multi-core architectures, heterocore architectures, and things like that. So these were some of the. So now, instead of going after this Moore's law or scaling, so you look for new novel concept in device, novel physics for running these devices and get your computation or electronic processes being done. So that brings us to nanotechnology. So in this introductory lecture, I quickly review the nanotechnology, what are the basic things involved in the nanotechnology, and then how it will enable the electronics to go beyond Moore's law or beyond CMOS. So it will be a kind of two-part lecture. So today we will introduce the concept of nanotechnology and what are the things involved in nanotechnology, and probably later we may take up some of the novel devices based on those physics and or nanoelectronic devices. We'll see here. So what is nanoelectronics? One need to understand. See, it is not about very often when somebody is asked about nanoelectronics, the immediate thing they come to their mind is about the dimensions. Actually, we will say that, okay, if the dimensions are in the nanometer regime, you have this like you talk of nanoelectronics. If you look that way, we are in the nano regime. Actually, if almost all the CMOS devices in the last 3-4 generations were below 100 nanometers actually. So the typical features were in that. So, but they were simply the traditional CMOS devices. Even if you consider the 22 nanometer node or 7 nanometer node, it is typically the CMOS. So when you talk of nanotechnology, it is not only about the dimensions actually. Basically one has to see what are the changes, change in physics happening at those dimensions. That is the most important thing. Then only we can talk of the nanoelectronics or nanogeometries, where the fundamental physics change, because we know that physics, there are 3 areas or 3, when you talk of theoretical physics, there are 3 areas. One is Newtonian physics, or typically known as classical mechanics, where Newton's equations are valid. So you talk of position and momentum and all those equations of motion. So generally, it is applicable to large bodies like planetary motion or large those dimensions. It is valid. When we come to the subatomic particles or atomic particles, and there we have seen that this Newtonian principles will not be valid. We need to introduce a new concept, that is the wave nature of all those particle has to be introduced. So the duality will be coming into play. So you need to look into the wave nature of the particle. So we had to formulate a new physics, which is popularly known as quantum mechanics. One of the basic ideas is you have a Schrodinger equation corresponding to Newtonian equation. You have a Schrodinger equation, and Schrodinger equation is, if you look into Schrodinger equation, you can see that basically it is a wave equation, and the solution of that Schrodinger equation for different physical systems will give you a description of that physical system. For example, one of the classic example I can tell you is the energy band structure. What is the energy distribution of electrons in a typical solid? It is solved quantum mechanically. So, and you can get the energy band structure of different materials using that. You are applying Schrodinger equation and getting it solved that particular substance material. So that is how you get the energy band structure. So those at those levels, the quantum mechanics comes into play. So the second important thing about quantum mechanics is, one is the wave nature. Second is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. That is earlier the Newtonian mechanics. The fundamental thing was you have position and momentum can be measured simultaneously. With there is no uncertainty in any of them. Whereas once you consider the wave nature, that goes. Heisenberg principle says that when you measure momentum with precision, then there will be uncertainty in the position, and similarly when you go for the position, then there will be uncertainty in the momentum. So there is uncertainty in this. So that is another thing, because it comes basically due to the wave nature of the particle. So this is another thing which comes in when we are considering the subatom. Yeah.
Why we have these two type of physics or mechanics? Can't we apply one to the other domain or like that?
No, actually, the thing is, classical mechanics can be said. I mean, you are talking about quantum mechanics and classical mechanics, isn't it?
Can't we solve all problem by quantum mechanics only?
Actually, you say that. That is true. In principle, it is, you are right. Actually, you can apply, but the problem is computation. I can tell you one typical example. Even if you take a hydrogen atom solution, then it takes a lot of computational efforts to solve the. So it's all about the computational effort. So you have to do it. The quantum mechanics need to be applied for a large system. It demands a lot of computational time. So that is why you need when you apply the Newtonian physics at the large systems, it doesn't affect the accuracy actually, because even if you can apply the quantum mechanics there also, there is no harm done, but then it is going to take a huge computational effort. That is the issue. But other way it is not possible. You cannot apply classical mechanics down to the subatomic particle. So that is true. It's like measuring a small, using a nanometer. You can always measure the 1 meter or 100 meters, but then using a 100 meter, you cannot measure the nanometer. No, that is, so its reverse is always possible. You can use quantum mechanics in principle, but it is not normally done because you don't need that kind of, because a lot of time will be wasted in the computation. So that's why there are some transition areas where both of them will be used actually. Because I have seen one hydrogen atom case. Even using if you use quantum mechanics, it takes a lot of computational effort. The hydrogen atom model itself. So that is why it is not generally applied to the macroscopic system. So then the third one is, of course, the relativistic theory of relativity. When the body is in motion, because that is not very important for us as microelectronics is concerned, but for the since I mentioned that the physics has 3 parts. So the third part is, of course, when the particle is moving, with large velocity, or large velocity means velocity comparable to the velocity of light. There will be some changes happening in the system. There is the mass, there will be a change in the mass and things like that. So that is taken care of by the theory of relativity proposed by the Einstein and things like that. So, but our interest is in classical and where the velocity is not very significant as compared to the velocity of light, and then the quantum, because typically we have seen that the dimension of our devices were shrinking. So naturally, we were seeing some changes in the physics. Actually, we have experienced. For one classic example is tunneling. Tunneling cannot be explained based on classical mechanics. It cannot be, because we don't, because there is a barrier, and there is a barrier. We cannot, the electrons or the carriers cannot move from one side to other. So the tunneling can be explained only on the basis of the wave nature, because you can talk of a tunneling probability, and so wave transmission. Very often it is analyzed using transmission probability. That is typically of the wave. Actually, when you talk of transmission, and you can see that the transmission depends on the barrier width, not on the height. So and it is observed as the width decreases, whatever be the height you experience. There are other conditions also to be met for tunneling, but one of the most important thing for tunneling is the barrier width. Width should be, the tunneling probability is directly inversely proportional to the width of the barrier. Width decreases, tunneling probability increases. So that is irrespective of the height. So that cannot be explained based on the classical mechanics. So that we have seen. So even when you are shrinking our devices, so this kind of physics was changed. The tunneling was coming into picture. And then other one was the quantization of energy level, discretization of energy levels, and all those things were happening even within the CMOS. I'm not getting into those aspects here. We are talking about what are the quantum. We are not talking here about what are the quantum effects happening in the MOS devices. So that was seen, and to a great extent, those effects were introduced in the models when we are doing the simulation. So many of these like typical models which are used in commercial softwares like Silvacore, Centeris, they have introduced those kind models based on the quantum effects which is happening in the MOS devices. So that is not what we are discussing today. So this the change in physics, and now it is like I mean, like the statement I would like to make here is, in the case of MOS devices, this tunneling and all those quantum effects were kind of deteriorating the performance of the devices. Now, the classical thinking is, why not take advantage of this those physics rather than fighting with? It's like is a classical way you say, rather than fighting the enemy, you join. You cannot win the enemy, then you make friendship with them and then take advantage of them, and that will be a win-win for both. So that is the idea. That is the central idea which is used in this, that you take advantage of those quantum principles for the working of your devices, if it is possible. So that is the typical approach. So when we talk, so that is one thing I have to say about here is about the nanoelectronics. That is, the dimensions are not the important thing. It is the change in physics which is happening at the small geometry. So that is the important thing. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Now, so when you talk of nanoelectronics, I mean, I will not be going into all of them, but we need to understand there are 2-3 things we need to talk about nanoelectronics. One is, I mean, different areas of nanoelectronics. One is actually just like in chemistry, or chemistry, you have organic chemistry and inorganic chemistry. Inorganic chemistry is the chemistry of all other elements other than carbon. Carbon form a big group of compounds. Almost all living organisms have carbon. That is why it is known as the organic chemistry. So carbon and its compound makes one branch of chemistry. Similarly, in nanoelectronics also, one major area is occupied by carbon and other form of 2D material like graphene. So that is one area where you can make a lot of useful applications. It's where the nanoelectronics carbon comes as carbon nanotube. So naturally the dimensions, especially the diameter, is in the nanometer regime. The tube length can go up a few centimeters, but then diameter is in the nanometer regime. So you have CNTs, carbon nanotubes are there. It can be tube or it can be a cylindrical form. So that is there. And then graphene, that is again another form of carbon. So this typically they are known as 2D materials. So they have a lot of applications in nanoelectronics. Many of the nanoelectronics already they are available in the market based on CNTs and the things like that. Graphene, a lot of effort. Almost every laboratory in the world is working on graphene and making new devices, exploring all sort of possibilities using these materials. So CNT is one area, and carbon and graphene, CNT and graphene is one area of nanoelectronics, which we will not be looking into. Then you have the molecular electronics, where this we have using molecules, you get a lot of working. So that is the molecular electronics people talk of. Then it's there in that context DNA, because the DNA is the basic building block of your life actually, and you know that all of your information is stored. So it can be a vast memory, because in computation memory is very important. So there this DNA based electronics could be of great help for memory applications. So there are those efforts are on to take advantage, to understand and take advantage of that. Then comes purely quantum devices, like take advantage of the quantum effects and devices based on that. They are generally known as the quantum effects, quantum devices. So I will be discussing mostly about the quantum devices only. I will not get into CNT or molecular electronics or DNA electronics. I will not touch upon that. We will just bird's eye view of the quantum devices. We are not going into depth, because just introductory level idea about the quantum devices. Okay.
Fine, sir.
Yeah. So
actually, there is one question, sir.
Yeah.
Like, is there any any predefined parameter in which we are trying to increase our performance, like based on something like?
See, actually, when you talk of computation, it is the speed.
Like we are saying in device, like we are saying we are making faster. Like
yeah, that is. I'll explain to you. There are two things when you talk of computers. See, one of the main area as far as the microelectronics is concerned is the computation. We want faster and faster computation. But what is the cost you have to pay? Cost means the amount of power you have to consume, and amount of investment involved in the fabrication that is there. So you want like the power to be kept minimum. Is a classic example. If you have a competing with our brain do a lot of computation with a very less, which is a highly energy efficient system as compared to your normal microprocessor. So when you talk of typical computers, you know that the computer has two. One is the processing unit, and then is the memory. You need a huge amount of memory. So these two things, minimum area you want to store the maximum and then you are dependent on your binary, your Boolean algebra for all this computation. So and you are using only two variables. So this, can I change all these approaches? Like typically we were using Neumann's architecture. There's or it's known as stored memory programs and things like that. Now you have a basic processing unit, then you have intermediate memories and things like that. This was the standard. So you have a basic building block of processor, and then you have intermediate memories and all this. So you are trying to increase the computation process speed as well as the memory capacity. So these were the two things at a lower cost in the sense area as well as the power. So you want to increase the performance because today any problem is a computational problem. Any process, like you need to we are taking up is a computational problem. So if you have whether it is synthesizing a drug for corona or seeing the evolution of the virus or launching a rocket or a space shuttle, everything is a computational problem. So that way so you need to even the weather forecasting, whatever be, all the problems are all the challenges or problems are converted into a computational problem. So faster and faster computers are always welcome. So when we say the performance, it is the computational speed at a lesser cost. When I talk of the cost, it is the time. I mean, the time should be definitely less as well as the other cost. So that is the meaning of the performance. Is it clear?
So to summarize it, we can say that like there is no such thing as the fastest.
Every day
as much fast we should go, but providing the constraints by economy and that power consumption.
Exactly. That is true. Because that is why all this scaling. Initially, we were reducing the increasing the number by reducing the area and putting more, and then we were increasing the clock frequencies, etc. So you are getting more and more computations done. So that is what. Then, you have seen microprocessor evolution. If you see, initially they didn't have any on-chip memories. Then you have introduced cache, and then different levels of cache memories. L1, L2, all those cache happened, and the things like that. So that has gone up to 486 or 5. Pentium and those kind of processors you have seen. Now, then you have seen the multi-core processors, and there is no increase. I mean, the frequency was not increasing that drastically, but basically in the earlier days, we were increasing the computational speed by increasing the number of processing units. That means hardware. Then you have the memory. Of course, memory requirement also went up because there's a lot of intermediate storage is necessary. Memory requirements were also increasing. Then, of course, the clock, because you are looking towards a synchronous system mostly. So you had this clock frequencies because it was dependent. So ultimately, the speed will be decided by the clock frequency also. So you are increasing the frequency and all those things. So in all these things, you are looking at the computation. So all these processes or whatever problems you want to handle, it was taken as a computational problem. So that is why today processors or microcontroller has permeated into everything. Anything you do, any systems you talk of, whether it is a electronic system, purely electronic system like computers or TV or cell phone, or you have a microcontroller. But if you talk of an automobile, you have you have any washing machine, all those everywhere. It is permeated. It's like omnipresent. This microcontroller. So every problem has become a computational problem. So naturally, you would like to increase the performance can be improved by increasing the computational speed. So that is why. So this was the earlier concept was just by scaling you can get those performance improvement. Then you are running.
Yeah. We are kind of optimizing the architecture, overall architecture of
the system. See, actually, I'm not going into all details, but that is, as a student of electronics, you know that you have there was a lot of architectural innovations. There was asynchronous systems. So all sort of efforts were. It's not that only by increasing the number. And so I have broadly touched. I have not touched into each and every. You have this quires in the processors also. The architecture was changed. Like you had a fine grain, quires grain, then pipelining. All sort of things has happened in the processes. So all these were with the point of view of increasing the computations. Yeah.
Will it be correct if somebody make a statement like if you see the overall work going on with our system, computation system? If I make a statement like we are kind of moving from Newman architecture to more toward the Harvard architecture. So
It is,
will that be true?
yeah, it is true. I think it is true. I am not an expert in this, but still I feel it is true because now it is possible actually. Earlier that when you started the computational, the typical computer, because we had the limitations, but we don't have that kind of limitation. And that way we can switch over to Harvard architecture. Many of the systems are available now. Harvard architecture systems, which were not very popular in the beginning of my electronics era. Now it is available also. So increasingly going towards that. And then many other things are also happening. You are taking advantage of your many of these neural architectures. Many other architectures are also coming on an experimental level, like reconfigurable systems, and all those things are coming. Because the earlier days we were limited by that also. You had a typical hardware, so all the manipulations were done using the software. Now we can, with the evolution in FPGAs and that kind of thing, you can have reconfigurable hardwares are possible. While or at the static, that means when the computation starts, you can do it, or during the runtime also you can reconfigure your hardware. That was a big change in the computation. So that all these things are happening. So I have not covered all the aspects of computer, mind you. So I have just touched upon certain aspects, but the idea was to increase the computational speed with less cost that was there. Cost in terms of power, and then the silicon real estate. So that is there. Okay.
Oh, fine, sir.
Yeah. So this is so you are right there. There are a lot of efforts going on parallelly to increase the computational speed. Now, so when you're coming to nanotechnology, like we have seen that like when you talk of these quantum devices, one important thing which has happened in this is, see, typically when you look at microelectronics, so see, we have very often come across the term top-down approach actually. So that a top-down approach is typically used for design actually. When you microelectronics engineer talk of top-down approach, it is the design actually, because you start with certain specification. You see you have a larger picture in mind, and then go down and go up to the silicon. So that, and then you'll be seeing few layers and things like that. So that is the kind of picture. So I mean, any microelectronics engineer can visualize. You have a typical SoC, system on a chip. You have so at the bigger picture is you have the whole system integrated into a single chip of silicon. So that is what. So that is the top-down approach we talk of as far as the design is concerned. So in the fabrication side also, may not be very familiar to most of you, but in the fabrication also one can talk of typically top-down approach. It's like, I will tell, you take a piece of stone and then chip it out, and you can make different designs on that. Actually, you can make a good statue with that. You can shape it into anything. So that was happening as far as the microelectronics was concerned. You have silicon wafer or a silicon wafer, then you patterning means basically etching and adding some layers into that. So it is basically, it is like chipping out a part of silicon and putting something else into that. So layer by layer you are creating that structure. So that is typically one can talk of in terms of top down in the fabrication actually. So starting with the stone, you are ending with the some pattern, and then that is embedded into silicon, or pattern. Silicon is patterned like that by. So when you are, see, just imagine when you are starting with a few millimeters or centimeters of chip and reaching up to a few nanometers, you are wasting a lot of material actually if you are going for a top-down approach. Whereas the beauty of nanoelectronics is just opposite actually. You are using a bottom-up approach. Like we are all made of bottom-up approach actually. Nature follows that. It's actually nature is the best example. Actually, one of the interesting thing which, if you look into nanoelectronics, you will see is we are mimicking the nature in many things actually. Well, like we have a lot many things happening in the nature is typically bottom-up approach. For example, all of us are made of single cells, and the multiplication of the cells, like by the, you understand the basic biology. So, and then from a single cell, we are multiplied and made the full body is made. So this is a kind of, so similar concept can be used to develop the system. So that will be more efficient as compared to top-down approach. So this is so very often what people talk in terms of self-assembly or bottom-up approach by atom. So you are starting with atoms and growing up to few atomic layers. So that is the one approach which is very popular in nanoelectronics. Of course, there are other approaches. The top-down approaches are also there, but increasingly we are moving towards the bottom-up approach. So that is one thing which is happening in nanoelectronics. Okay.
Okay, sir. So is it like first we are independently working on smaller building blocks, and then we are combining them to make an overall optimized system?
No, it is like when we talk of when we are talking of bottom-up approach, means it is assembling a few atomic layers, you assemble them together, because you have to understand, when we talk of nanoelectronics, today we have the capability of playing with the atoms. You have heard of that IBM logo, which was made using xenon atoms or nickel. Actually, that is the smallest logo, and where they have developed that atomic force microscope and tunneling microscope. So you can pick up atoms. You can, of course, traditionally these microscopes are used for seeing the atoms or visualizing the atoms, or surface morphology can be studied. But this can be used for the fabrication purpose also. Fabrication means you can pick up atoms and place it in a different surfaces. So you can play with the atoms. So once you can play with the atoms, they are the basic building blocks for your structure. So in principle, you can use that for them for the bottom up approach. Very often, this when we talk of self-assembly, it's a chemical process actually. Atoms will have a certain.
So it is not like we have some pre-built smaller blocks and then we are combining them.
Not necessarily. Yeah, it is also that sometimes functionalization of carbon nanotubes are done like that. You have carbon nanotubes, then you attach certain external molecules to carbon nanotubes, so that way you use it for different functions. So that is known as functionalization. You attach some different molecules to carbon nanotubes. So that also can be done. It's not that you have a larger building block. It's not like the big blocks, and no. It is at the atomic level. When we are talking about nanoelectronics, is essentially atomic or molecular level we are talking about.
It is just more or less like kind of assembly at lower level.
Exactly. Assembly, yeah. So that is why we will be playing with atoms, or at the maximum you might be playing with the molecules actually. So that then only we can talk of a self-assembly or bottom-up approaches, things like that. Then your deposition. See, for example, again, this molecular beam epitaxy can be used, atomic layer deposition, and all those techniques can be also used. The chemistry play a very important role, but these the techniques which we have developed, deposition techniques, especially MBE and atomic layer deposition techniques, are quite popularly used. Then you can use this atomic force microscope also for the patterning and making structures. It can be used actually. So they are being used. So that is the bottom-up approach we talk of. Yeah. So this nanoelectronics has all these features are being used in the development of nanoelectronic devices. So it has not only applications in electronics, because we are looking at it from the computational point of view, because I told you, as far as electronics is concerned, it is every problem is a computational problem. So efficient computational systems can be made. So physics people have come, great help in this actually. Which is even though I am a man of physics, I don't understand much of this because there is a famous statement by Richard Feynman that if you say that you understand quantum mechanics, that means you don't understand quantum mechanics. So I take rescue in that statement, See, but one of the, it's expected last many years, a lot of efforts are going on in going into that actually. From there is a shift in computation, a breakthrough in computation is going to happen if you go to quantum computers actually. If you can achieve the quantum computers, then all of your present day computers become obsolete, because these quantum computers are expected to be much faster than the traditional Boolean algebra based. So then based computer, they don't need that kind of devices and things like that. But it is it's at a very primitive stage only. A lot of work need to be done in that. So probably these quantum devices is expected to play a very important role in achieving these quantum computers. So many of your computational problems will be simplified if the quantum computers are is expected to like help to solve many of these computational problems once the quantum computer is established. So one thing I would like to mention here is whenever we talk of nanoelectronics, with that I think I'll stop my today's lecture with that statement that one of the oldest whenever we talk of nanoelectronics, people normally see, just like microelectronics, we start with Moore's law, the scaling and the things like that. Whenever people talk of nanoelectronics, they start with Richard Feynman's one famous lecture. I think it was given in 1959 at Caltech students, the popular lecture. There is plenty of room at the bottom, actually. So he was, those days, even microelectronics had not come into existence. So in 1959, so he was talking about there is a lot of scope at the atomic level, and that is what we are seeing when you talk of the nanoelectronics. So that is a famous. So very often people give credit to Feynman for the starting of nanoelectronics, but then the real breakthrough came with the invention of scanning tunneling microscope and atomic force microscope. So that was the starting point of the nanotechnology or nanoelectronics. Of course, there is a famous this name itself was coined by Derek Exler. So he was Nano Machines, and he has a famous book written by him. So, but then this engineer's role is not to be forgotten. That atomic force microscope and scanning tunneling microscope, the development of the invention of that played a very important role in the development of nanotechnology. So this is broadly about the nanotechnology. So in the next part, I will be discussing about the quantum devices, what are the different kinds of quantum devices, what is the basic working principle, and what could be their use, and something like that we will be discussing. Yeah. Any further questions?
No, sorry. If you have some that if this Feynman lecture you are referring and this AFM discovery, if you have some documents about them, please post the link.
Yeah, it is there. This is actually, it's one of the most popular lecture. So it is different. Even in the YouTube is available. Otherwise, it is there. If there is plenty of room in the bottom, if you Google it, it will be easily available. But I have I will be having somewhere in my archives. I can send you, because I'm a huge fan of Richard Feynman. So many of his, most of his books I have collected, and the soft copy as well as the hard copy, and definitely I will be having, so I can share it with you. So that is no issue. Yeah. And regarding this AFM and scanning tunneling microscopy, I don't think I have any. I might be having, but it will not be easy for me to find out. But then you can go to IBM site, and they have actually one small movie, the smallest movie using atoms. They have made a movie also, so that is also interesting. So that I can share with. It's available in YouTube or IBM site if you go. then there you can see that. That is also interesting. Using atoms, here they made a human structure and things like that. Apart from making that IBM logo, so that is also a lot of funny thing they have done. Yeah.
Okay, I will check, sir.
Yeah. So shall I stop the